we're going to start with our main event as Ketlen Vieira gets the unanimous decision win over Miesha Tate, an outcome that many in the community knew was a possibility, but maybe because of the popularity of Miesha Tate, none wanted to accept. Mm-hmm. So Dominic, this card kind of left a lot of people just, I don't know, that not all that excited. I found I was very taken aback by the lack of any real dialogue on Twitter or anywhere else about Ketlen Vieira's win. I mean, this ultimately is probably the biggest win of her career, and no real discussion on, how her performance was, or I guess, what might be next for her. Instead, majority of discussion was just on a lot of the scoring of this fight. This card could have been scored about 5 different ways. I mean, even me and Dominic had it reversed. Dominic had it 4-1 Miesha Tate, and I had it 4-1 for Ketlen Vieira. And even though it was a unanimous decision, we knew it was going to be one of those fights where it could easily have been a split decision that went to Tate, and these rounds were very close.
Yeah.
However, I guess in your opinion, because we will give some time for Ketlen Vieira here, and this was ultimately what was very obvious to me about this matchup being put into place. And I didn't say this on Friday, but I should have. Ketlen Vieira is essentially Amanda Nunes light. She kind of does everything that Amanda Nunes can do, but at a lesser level. So that was kind of the test here for Miesha Tate. How do you handle someone who's big like Amanda Nunes, who's powerful like Amanda Nunes, who has some great skills like Amanda Nunes, but is a lesser version of Amanda Nunes? And you saw that, in my opinion, this wasn't the best performance from Miesha Tate. And, you look at the fight itself, and what was a big hole for me the whole time, Ketlen Vieira's chin was pretty much wide open the entire fight. I mean, she was constantly sticking that chin straight up in the air. I'll give Miesha credit. She was the one pressing the action. Ketlen decided to play more of the counterpuncher role in this fight. But Ketlen was essentially just headhunting the whole time. Didn't really mix up her strikes at all. No body work, no leg kicks, nothing. And Miesha, who has shown more of an ability to do that in the past, kind of just followed suit, just started headhunting. And she was missing a lot, in my opinion. And this is just a disappointing performance. Obviously, this woman had a long layoff, and maybe our expectations shouldn't be so high for her as she's coming back after being off for 4 years. But I don't think that's the story here. I don't think it's, Miesha Tate's still trying to get her footing. Dominic, I think this fight is a harsh reality because I think the game has passed her generation by. And once you saw how she competed with someone who's more of the new wave of bantamweights, Marion Renault was very much of her generation. Right. And now you look at someone like Ketlen Vieira, it wasn't this fight, even though it was very, very competitive in the sense of like, you could score rounds one way or another. In a way, this was just it was a dull performance for Miesha Tate, I would say.
Yeah, it was, man, and it wasn't. I don't know. I mean, that's a good point, right? The sentiment you make to where maybe she just hasn't evolved with these times, and that's probably due to such a long time off between her first stint and now her second stint in her career. And Marion Renault was more so with Miesha as one of those like OG women's mixed martial artists. So, it was interesting. There were still small aspects where you could still see the improvements that Miesha's made kind of in that stand-up as compared to where she used to be. But in terms of like competing with a great striker like Ketlen or something, if you look at if she had won that fight, some of these other strikers, GDR, Holly Holm, Irene Aldana, they're all very good, very powerful, and have evolved with the times or even are a part of that newer wave of mixed martial arts. So it was definitely one where I'm not ready to just write Miesha off completely because there were still a couple of aspects that I felt, you did see the improvements, but it's a matter of can she continue to do this before it is for sure too late to get into this elite of the division. And, for Ketlen Vieira, a lot of complaints from like DC as he was calling the fight to where he felt she could have been a lot more aggressive than what she was, because when she would throw, she would land, and they were pretty hard shots. That 5th round, she really busted up Miesha a lot. Her eye was swollen, her nose was bleeding. It was pretty bad in those that 5th round specifically. So Ketlen is someone that does have talent. She's only 30 years old. She looked like a featherweight in there last night against Miesha, by the way, too. She looked much larger. Miesha is still maybe physically a little bit stronger in terms of their clinch positioning, but overall, Ketlen just looked like the more prepared, more well-rounded, better fighter on that night. And, it wasn't a star-making performance for either person. There's not a huge takeaway that I wish I had coming out of this, regardless of who the winner is. But at the end of the day, Ketlen did get the biggest win of her career. I am a bit curious what you think could potentially be next for her after a showing like this.
Well, what's weird, Dominic, is the more I'm talking about this fight, the more I am kind of like this fight. I'm not just trying to write off Miesha Tate, but I'm also almost ready to kind of write off Ketlen Vieira in terms of any serious as being a serious contender. This fight didn't do it for me. I mean, this didn't feel like a very high level bout, and yet it was the main event of a UFC fight night where the number 7 versus number 8 women's bantamweight fighter were going head to head. But it didn't feel, in terms of the action I saw, I didn't get that at all. Yeah. I thought both women's offense was completely predictable. They kind of just traded, and you look at like Miesha Tate was obviously being hurt by the shots that Ketlen was throwing more often than the reverse. Miesha was hitting or landing at a more efficient clip, but Ketlen was actually hurting her with what she was throwing, and yet Miesha never changed her game plan at all. She just kept moving forward, kept getting in the pocket and exchanging. And when you had someone like Ketlen who was essentially headhunting the whole time, I mean, you could have opened you up for a lot of body work there. There was a lot that could have been done, and I just walk away from this fight going like kind of the wind out of the sails a little bit. Like, really, this was a fight that could have potentially set up a title fight for someone. I mean, again, was that my own fault for putting it's not that I thought Miesha Tate with the win here could potentially compete with Amanda Nunes. I just thought that might be what the UFC would do.
Right.
But this is just a stark contrast from what we saw against Marion Renault. Against Marion, I felt like she played a very smart fight. She did do a lot of level changes. She did effectively strike and effectively grapple. And while Ketlen Vieira was a bigger fighter here, and it was probably maybe not in her best interest to really go to the ground with her, but Ketlen was getting the better of her on the feet, which really shouldn't have been the case because Ketlen Vieira is not a high-level striker. She was throwing with a lot of power, but it was all at the head. Miesha Tate should have been able to get the better of this fight standing, and really she didn't. She just kind of dropped the ball in pretty much every aspect of MMA here. It's one of those fights where it doesn't make me excited for either one to see what's next for them. I mean, again, I'm not going to say there's not fights left. If we're talking about like Miesha Tate, obviously she can keep fighting. She's got matchups that are there. But as far as like in this position, 5-round main event of a fight night, no, that's done. But Ketlen Vieira, what could be next for her? I mean, I'm not throwing her in with anybody above her right now.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. I mean, that's just asking for her to get – I mean, she goes up against someone like Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, one of these better strikers. She's going to get demolished if she fights similar to how she did here. If she keeps that chin open, if she tries to get into a firefight, they will put her out.
Yeah.
And, so because of that, I don't have a name in mind, but she's definitely going to have to work her way back up. I mean, I know she beat number 8 here, but she's going to have to fight someone else to really show me that she's even kind of, if we're even going to really seriously consider her a contender moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it best, right? In terms of like both performances in this fight, regardless of who the judges' scorecards would have went to, there wasn't as we talked about on Friday, the preview, maybe if there's a big performance, we could get the next title contender. But then you look at the fight, and again, regardless of who the winner would have been, obviously it came out to be Ketlen Vieira. I'm not ready to say she's amongst those elite, amongst those title contenders. There's still much more that needs to be seen for her to get up there. The problem being that this division is just the most stale women's division, not counting featherweight. I'm not going to count that one. So this being the most stale, stagnant division, that as sad as it is with, maybe she didn't have the best performance, but she still might not be that far away. I don't know. I know you didn't have a specific name in mind, but in terms of like someone else that is in the same boat as her, as what is their future going to hold in this division, I'd match her up with Aspen Ladd and say, hey, you two go out, and one of you basically are forced to make a statement essentially in this fight, because if you don't, you're just going to remain stagnant and become potentially irrelevant in this division. So
yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good name to throw out there. If Aspen Ladd could even make that weight anymore,
exactly,
then that would be a good fight. And it's, even though I'm being kind of hard on these two, like it's just to me, it's not the end of the world. I mean, Ketlen Vieira, to her credit, fought a fight that is not typically suited for her strengths.
Yeah.
Typically, from what I understand of Ketlen Vieira's game, I've always looked at her as being a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner, and she does carry some power, but all in all, I wouldn't call her a high-level striker. Mm-hmm. And here, she outboxed Miesha Tate, who I would have said on paper had the better striking skill set. But whether it was just on pure power or even Miesha Tate's game plan not really being all that great, or her fight IQ to at least change things up, change some looks, wasn't there. Ketlen Vieira does get a win by doing a fight that I would say was not suited for her skills. So that's a positive takeaway right there. For Miesha Tate, I'm going to need to see. This fight was very glaring in the sense that her game plan from before she came out there, she gets into round one, whatever the game plan was, she stuck with it for all 5 rounds. And sometimes that can be good, but here, I get it. All these rounds were super close, and like Dominic, you had it 4-0 going into the 5th round. So technically, if the judges had seen it the same way, then we might be having and if it had been scored that way, we might be having a different discussion, because I'd be saying, well, I guess she needs to just keep doing what she's doing. She's up 4 rounds to none. Yeah. But both women made it very clear they knew how close this fight was at the end. And when you just saw where Miesha was getting, I mean, you looked at their faces afterwards, it didn't look close. Miesha got kind of battered. And again, that's the power difference. It's a hard fight to evaluate for that reason, because for this fight could have easily had gone to Miesha Tate, and then it almost changes the discussion around a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think there are still fights for Miesha Tate and obviously Ketlen Vieira. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm not saying that there's no chance for like Ketlen Vieira to potentially, be a title contender. But it was like, this was a glaring sign of like, I'm not exactly sure that Ketlen Vieira is really, the top 6 of this division I look at as like a title contender. Well, she's like the outside looking in right now.
Yeah.